The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Geeks Under the Influence podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of RVA Magazine, Loot Crate, amzn.to, or their employees. Listener discretion is advised. Fuck off if you don't like it.
Well, howdy, geeks. Welcome to a very special, spoiler-heavy review of Matthew Vaughn's second effort into the Kingsman with the Golden Circle. Like I said, spoiler-heavy, so going into this, if you haven't seen it and don't want it to be spoiled, then check out our non-spoiler review available at goipodcast.com. The links will be in the notes for this episode. But if you've seen it or you're interested in the plot points of Kingsman: The Golden Circle, then welcome.
Geeks Under the Influence.
All right, what can I say about Kingsman: The Golden Circle? First off, you may notice, those watching the video of this, my jaunty little hat that I have, that was brought to us courtesy of Sophia, our friend in New York, who got to see a special preview event for Kingsman: The Golden Circle that involved a Q&A with Jeff Bridges. That is all part of our non-spoiler review available at goipodcast.com. I unfortunately couldn't go to a special screening, but I did see the movie, and that's what we're talking about moving forward. First, let's get into the basic plot of Kingsman: The Golden Circle. For those that saw the first movie, it very much kind of picks up where the other one left off, as Kingsman is a secret agent organization. They go around solving, super crime that's happening in the most ridiculous way possible, with all sorts of Inspector Gadget and James Bond style gadgets, and a lot of ignoring gravity. I had an absolute blast with the first Kingsman. It was something that I didn't really have much interest in seeing in the theater, but when it came out on Blu-ray, I was blown away. It was not something that I was even on my radar for the most part. And the church sequence alone in the first movie made it well worth the purchase to have that in my collection. So going into the second Kingsman movie, The Golden Circle, I had my expectations a lot higher than it did the first one. Where we're continuing with the story is that Eggsy has gotten into real secret agent level. He's a lot more comfortable in the position. He knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for a little while. And when we meet up with him again, the Swedish princess from the first movie is now his girlfriend, and they seem to have a very healthy relationship for a Swedish princess and a secret agent. When we meet Eggsy, he runs across a former Kingsman initiate who did not make the program that you actually saw in the first movie, who's now working for a super shadowy organization and has a robot arm. That robot arm really kind of sets up the tone for the rest of the movie. Now, if you really liked the tone of the first movie, it definitely goes in that direction, but amps it up just another 200% after that. Figure that if you were to watch a normal James Bond movie pre-Daniel Craig, there's a certain level of ridiculousness that you're going to be expecting with those movies. But then you go into Moonraker, and it just takes it to a whole different level, like moon-based laser fights. It gets just unreal with its weirdness, and Kingsman: The Golden Circle very much follows in that path. You're going to get the winks to the audience. You're going to get the slow-mo action craziness. You're going to get the cool gadgets like you did in the first movie, but that's way more of a focus than the heart behind the first one. Speaking of, let's get into kind of some of my issues that I had with Kingsman: The Golden Circle. First off, robot dogs. No, you heard me right. Robot dogs. The villain, played by Julianne Moore, Poppy, has a secret mountain base that I feel like they missed an opportunity for it to be a volcano. Like a dormant volcano. That seems like kind of a no-brainer. You're already off in the middle of nowhere on a mountain. Just make that mountain a volcano. It's just going to add to the level of absurdity that this movie already has. That being said, her secret lair is covered in 1950s kitsch, which on its own is kind of ridiculous, but you're buying into it. You know what you're signing up for a Kingsman movie into this point. The big reveal of her having giant, overly complicated robot dogs with exposed everything, gears and inner workings. not only does it seem completely non-functional, but just unnecessary. I understand we're talking about like a secret 1950s diner lair on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, so we're already at a certain level. But when you go into robot dogs, there's just really no reason for it. They try to justify it later on in the movie when she says how unreliable people and living beings tend to be, which is why she leans on robots. These are dogs. If you get the right dog trainer, you can get a dog to do pretty much anything. And I'm pretty sure her being the overlord of the world's drug trade, she can afford a $200 an hour dog trainer instead of spending, I'm just ballparking here, $750,000 per dog robot. It just seems kind of unnecessary, and they don't work that well. Sure, they have drill teeth, but have you ever been bitten by a dog? You don't need drill teeth. You need just dog teeth. Also, the gadgetry, along with the robots, they take that to a whole new level in this movie. I had mentioned the church scene in the first movie. That was almost completely without gadgets, aside from the tone from the phone that made Galahad go crazy. That was it. The rest of it was just super kinetic, high action, fast paced, great, amazingly choreographed action. And it was ridiculous to the point where I was crying laughing by the end of that sequence because it was just so well done and so ridiculous, and you didn't need a bunch of weird gadgetry. This movie takes a lot away from the action sequences by instituting so many gadgets that you've got like a briefcase that shoots missiles and also turns into a shield. You've got a tracking device that can only be inserted through a vagina. That's the only way that it's really going to get in there. They didn't think about maybe the mouth would work as well, but they apparently had to have a scene where Eggsy goes to a festival and has to fuck a chick. Now, if you had seen the movie, he obviously doesn't because he's actually a good boyfriend and doesn't want to cheat on his girlfriend, asks her permission. She's obviously not that cool with it unless they're engaged, which weirdly made sense. It made as much sense as just about anything in this movie, where you understand that she knows his position as a saver of the world. There are some aspects of that she's got to just kind of deal with, and something as ridiculous as giving permission for him to fuck another person, you kind of understand it from her perspective, that it's necessary to get the job done. She knows she's dating a spy, secret agent dude, so it's part of the deal. That's kind of passable, but the fact that was even necessary for the storyline, it absolutely wasn't. The biggest problem that I have with this is the plot device that is used to kick this whole thing off, which is Julianne Moore, Poppy, the drug lord, uses the robot arm from her minion to hack into the entire Kingsman system through a USB port in a cab. I don't know how many of you out there actually work in IT or work on building firewalls, but that just seems like a bad IT situation. I don't know if there's anybody besides Merlin that's working on their security protocols, but I would figure that an agency that has the ability to do what they do would have maybe some offline servers that has some of their deepest secrets available only through a direct line. The idea that this robot hand is able to properly hack through their firewalls every bit of information outside of their connection with the statesman through a USB port in a cab just seems utterly ridiculous to me. And we're talking about a movie that has Julianne Moore in a 50s diner on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere and laser lassos. Those are more believable than that robot hand pulling a fucking R2-D2 and getting into their system. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mentioned the festival that Eggsy goes to in order to seduce a former lover of one-armed robot handman. It was an entirely unnecessary sequence that took about 20 minutes out of the plot and actually slowed it down a little bit. It was not necessary. There were a couple things, like the ski lodge sequence, as much as there were cool moments in that, and there was a very necessary plot point at the very end of it, that plot point could have been put in just about anywhere else. And for the most part, It's just exposition in a really cool environment. It slowed it down a little bit. I didn't feel like it was necessary. It could have been more necessary if the character Whiskey, the statesman, showed his hand just a little bit more to the audience. But they were saving that for the moment that the Galahad, or Harry, shoots him in the face, which did definitely come off a little bit jarring, and that was good. That reminded me a little bit of the end of Departed when Leo DiCaprio gets capped. The problem is that there was no give towards that idea that Whiskey was working the other side, except for Harry's suggestion that he was. Because of that, because there was no winking to it, I immediately believed Harry. 100% when he shot him in the face and said that he was a double agent or working the other side, I believed him 100% because it just seemed like an unnecessary path to take him as being just fucked up now and shooting people willy-nilly. That needed to be his coming back to being a good agent again. Another thing is Channing Tatum. He has done some works that I really liked, 21 and 22 Jump Street, his role in This Is the End. He obviously knows how to kind of make fun of himself, and he doesn't take himself too seriously, and I've warmed up a little bit to Channing Tatum. That said, his acting is so wooden in this movie that it's distracting. And his character, aside from a tiny minor part of the plot point, just doesn't do anything. He gets in a little fight with the Kingsmen when they first show up at the Statesman whiskey distillery, and then he just hangs out and apparently he smokes weed when he's off shift. That's about it. He's not needed. He's super not needed in this movie. Also, the thing with the Statesman, are there like just four? Are there four statesmen and that's it? I understand with the Kingsmen in this movie that there's only a couple, there's like three if you count Harry, alive because they got taken out by Poppy. The statesmen are left alone almost entirely by Poppy in her conquest to take over the world or at least legalize it. And that felt kind of disjointed. The Kingsmen get almost completely wiped off the map. Statesmen are fine. Not only do they have more money and more agents, but they're untouched by this, like, wiping off the map by Poppy. But you only see, besides little holograms sitting in a room, you only see like four of them, which you would think when world domination is on the table, you call all cars. I mean, you don't just have like two field agents, a dude that just drinks whiskey and then spits it out, and Halle Berry looking up stuff on the internet. Overall, this movie lacked the heart that the first movie had. That being said, let's get into some of the pros. I have talked a lot about the negative of this movie, but it definitely has a positive. This is a full speed ahead, crazy joyride of an action movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it winks at the audience all the time. It knows what it is, and it's not trying to be the super deep or insightful movie. It has a little bit of heart with Harry coming back and Eggsy seeing his father figure and trying to pull him out of an amnesiac state. But that's about where the heart is. It doesn't try to be this insightful movie like the first one is. They amp everything up 200%. The action sequences are ridiculous. We've talked about robot dogs, the amount of ammunition spent, and landmines, and just goofy fight scenes are so much fun to watch that you forget the fact that it's just not as good as the first one. It's still an absolute blast to watch. The most fun of this movie is inputting Elton John into this movie. All of a sudden he shows up, and the way that they explain his presence is beautiful. That as celebrities were being stolen in the first movie, Poppy took the chance to steal her favorite singer and keep him as a prisoner to sing a bunch of his songs whenever she felt like it. Perfect. But what they do with that is so much fun. Elton John is pissed that he's there. He has no problem speaking his mind about it. And apparently is able to drop kick the fuck out of people while wearing spangly high heels. It was a beautiful thing. It got a little bit tiring at a certain point, but then when they kept going and obviously were winking at the audience, knowing that it was just getting beyond ridiculous, I was back in again. Ultimately, I think the Elton John choice to have him in the movie the way he was and as often as he was a beautiful choice. And I was very happy that they put that in there just to kind of remind the audience that this is supposed to be fun and stupid. Overall, the problem that I had at the beginning of the movie is that the over-the-top tone was so much bigger than the first movie that these characters that you had met in the first movie didn't reach that level of bonkers. But when they instituted the Statesman, they come in guns blazing, as it were, and lassos going, and it really evens out the movie so that all the characters kind of fit the ridiculousness of the plot and the action sequences. So I think the Statesmen were actually the right choice here, introducing new characters that start off as crazy as the storyline is. It really pulls it together. Whiskey, the double agent, as it were, is just Burt Reynolds. It's Burt Reynolds lassoing the fuck out of shit with his laser lasso and is this casual badass, and it's wonderful. Channing Tatum is kind of a non-event. Jeff Bridges is just Jeff Bridgesing very hard. I feel like the spiritual prequel to the Statesman part of this would be Crazy Heart with Jeff Bridges. If you haven't seen it, he plays an old country singer, and it's basically the same character, but, you know, now a secret agent. Aside from Harry bringing the heart that was much needed in this movie, there's also the relationship with the Swedish princess and Eggsy. From the get-go, you're rooting for them. It's portrayed very well on screen. They seem very comfortable with each other. You want this relationship to last. So during the movie, when there's a falter in that relationship, it affects you. And that was very much needed in this goofy, wacky action movie. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I was not upset that it wasn't as good as the first movie. The first movie was an utter surprise to me, so to double up on that wasn't expected. It was overall a good experience. I think they pulled over $200 million at this point worldwide. So don't be surprised if there's another movie, a trilogy of Kingsman movies. It would be kind of surprising if they didn't at this point. I think Matthew Vaughn's doing a great job with this series, and I'm really looking forward to see what else he has to say about these characters moving into the third movie. Overall, great movie, and on our 1 to 10 ABV awesomeness by volume scale, I'm giving this a 6.5. So if you haven't already, go check out The Kingsman at your local theater. It's going to be going out of the theaters here probably in the next few weeks, so I would get on that. It's worth the ride. It was a lot of fun, and even though it's about 2 hours and 20 minutes, it didn't feel like it because of just how fast-paced the action was and how fun the characters were. So, from all of us at Geeks Under the Influence, I am Mike the Hobbit Bickett. See you at the movies, and join us or die.
Join us or die, join us or die, or I will swallow your soul. Necronomicon gives us power to rise from the dead. You play to take, our play begins to spread. You can fight all you want, cause you felt to resist. We're here to take the world and rule with an iron fist. So join us or die, join us or die, or I will swallow your soul.
GUIPodcast.com